Hello, everyone. My name is Julie McVeigh, and this is Unordinary Made Ordinary, where we talk about extraordinary experiences of everyday people. And today we're talking with Jaelina Holthof. Is that how you say your last name?
Holthof, yeah.
Okay, and Jaelina.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having us.
Yes, and I don't see two people there, but I do see room for somebody else to sit next to you. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But before we before we do, could you just share with everyone listening just a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, for sure. So, like Julie said, my name is Jaelina. I am 31 years old. I live in Ontario, Canada. I was born and raised actually in the southern states in Tennessee, Kentucky. I was born in North Carolina. So I immigrated to the States in 2008 after meeting my husband online. So we talked for a little over a year before I moved here to be with him.
Hmm,
So yeah, that's pretty much it.
okay. And can I ask you what is it that got you interested in this kind of topic, supernatural, metaphysical types of topics?
Well, I've always sort of been interested in. I've always had this weird connection to death. So when I was a child, when I was 2, I was misdiagnosed with cystic fibrosis.
Oh,
Yeah, so I
wow.
was misdiagnosed for 16 years. And so my whole childhood, I honestly never believed that I would make it to be an adult. So I never had aspirations to become an adult. So I had always sort of had this lingering over my head, this terminal diagnosis. And that I think is what started my sort of fascination with death and dying and that sort of thing. I used to, when I was a kid, I would go to graveyards and clean graves and do rubbings on graves and look the graves up. I've always been super
Really?
interested in that kind of thing. Yeah, for sure. So that's where it started for me. And then when I moved in with my husband, we got the tests redone, and there had been some speculation that it might have been a misdiagnosis since about 16. But when I moved here to Canada, we got the tests redone, and the doctor was actually able to explain sort of how I was misdiagnosed.
Mm.
And then it was like all of a sudden there were rainbows. I was going to live, and I could have a life with my husband, and all those sorts of things. So everything, death and dying, kind of went on the back burner until William got sick. So yeah.
Um, Now, so William, you say William got sick,
Mm.
and then so you were pretty much kind of put death out of your mind at that point.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and then I guess when anyone loved one close to us, anybody close to us gets sick, maybe that, especially if it's a really bad sickness, then yeah,
Mm.
that's gonna start being
The wheels
in
turning again.
yeah, a
Yeah,
little bit.
yeah,
Do you wanna would you mind sharing a little bit of
yeah,
that part of the story? Okay.
yeah, for sure. So when I met William, we knew, like, he was sick when I met him. So William was
Oh.
a severe diabetic. He had survived cancer in 2003, but it had some sort of leftover complications from that surgery, which made sort of insulin hard for his body to um, digest, and it didn't work the same way that it would in sort of a typical situation. And so his sugars were never really able to be controlled in a manner that would sustain him.
Mhm.
So he was okay when we first met. He was sick, and he had some bouts in the hospital, and like I said, he'd survived the cancer. But the next few years after we met, he started to have blood infections and things like that. And then his cancer got worse, and his kidneys started to fail. And so at that time, over the years, that was probably when sort of that whole fascination with things came back. But it was more of a fear again at that point, because
Oh.
this was the love of my life, and I was terrified of losing him. Um, but it was sort of your typical situation, and leading up into William's passing in 2019. I didn't really think of anything supernaturally. I didn't really think of anything
Interesting.
in that respect,
Right.
even though things had happened leading up to his passing that I didn't I didn't see as supernatural until his passing, which we can totally talk about that, because that's where things really kind of took off for me in that respect.
Yeah. Well, do you want to share a little bit
Yeah,
of the things
totally.
that happened that
Absolutely.
you didn't notice as anything, but now you look back and you think, oh,
Yeah.
it was that or that? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So probably so William passed in February of 2019. The year previous to that, he had lost his leg.
Wow.
So he was an amputee. And he was out of the house for 4 months. He was
Oh.
in rehab and learning how to walk and all that stuff again, and then getting into a prosthetic and all of that. And so when he was out of the house for 4 months, I started to have dreams, nightmares basically. And that's what I thought then. Before his passing, they were nightmares. But they were very vivid dreams that I even wrote down in my journals of him passing in bed beside me. And
Hmm.
I was always scared. I would wake up afraid, and I would message him on Facebook, and he was kind of always there and always sort of responding to me. And he would always tell me, "Don't worry, it's not going to happen." Later to find out that the way that I dreamt his passing was like moment for moment, second for second, exactly what happened the morning that he passed. So it
Okay.
was so vivid that those dreams now, I mean, when it happened that morning, I didn't know that it was real because I thought I was dreaming again.
Wow. Oh.
Yeah. And so while he was sort of in the hospital, I was always afraid because of those nightmares and all of those sorts of things. And I had told him
Mhm.
that I left the hall light on because I was afraid of just it being pitch dark. And in January of the year that he passed, so about a month before he passed, he had me hang up with him these Christmas lights, blue lights, that still are behind me actually in my living room, that hang over the banister of my living room. And when he did that, we kind of went under the lights, and he said to me, "Do they make you feel safe?" Um, Again, this was after Christmas. There was no like real reason for him to put them up. There was no, we didn't know that he was dying. There was no indication that he was dying other than these dreams that I just thought were dreams, of course, right?
Mhm.
And he had no way of knowing he was dying because he passed of sudden heart failure in his sleep. Um, so there was neither one of us knew it was happening, but somehow he did these things. And then about 2 weeks before his passing, I came home from work, and he was sitting at his desk on this computer, and he gave me the envelope to my birth certificate because I'd had it out for paperwork before. And on the back of that on the back of that envelope, he had written the lyrics to "Sometimes When We Touch." And in the chorus of that, it's "I want to hold you till I die." And he did. That's exactly how he died. He died holding me that night. So this is all
Mhm.
previous to his passing, within the last month of his passing. No way for him to know, no way for me to know, but very obvious that somehow his soul knew that he was leaving
Mhm.
me, because he was
Hmm.
preparing me
Interesting.
for that. And he had been preparing me in other ways, and putting things in my name, bills wise, things like that, things I don't think he even recognized that he was doing, but he was totally preparing me to be without him physically. So that's the things that led up to his passing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
It's okay. Me
it's pretty
too.
powerful. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so sorry. I'm like
No.
joking now. It's just beautiful. So now, okay, so during this whole time, you're not thinking any supernatural things or premonitions or
No, no,
really
not
are
at all.
going on here. Um, and could you, is it okay if you just take us through when that happened and
Yeah.
on that day? Okay.
Yeah. So I woke up in the morning. And I mean, I think that this is the very first day that supernatural popped into my head. That whole, phenomenon of sort of the afterlife and him not really being gone and that sort of thing. It's really the first time that it happened, because I woke up and I was facing away from him, and I knew. I didn't see him. There was no way for me to know. Physically, there was no reason for me to know, but I knew immediately. But again, because of these dreams, it was surreal. And so I thought I was dreaming again. And I got up and I sort of went through the motions, and I turned on the light and I saw him, and he was very obviously passed. And the only way that I knew that it was different from the dream was when I picked up the phone and called 911, because that didn't happen in the dream.
In your dreams, were they that physical to you, that
Yes.
real to you?
Yes.
But you still think these are you consider them dream states?
Not anymore. Not anymore.
So what do you consider those? What would you call those?
I think it was my soul preparing me for his soul to pass.
So, because it's just interesting to me that it was so physical and so real for you, like a lucid dream, or like
Very much so.
like being, I don't even know if this is the right way to say it, but like, you know, how somebody astral project and they're on a parallel reality, they say, or an alternate reality, and another timeline of their life or something like that. And it feels
Absolutely.
very, very real. Is that kind of what it was like?
I definitely think that it was in some ways a lucid dream. I don't understand it yet.
Yeah.
I know that it wasn't just a dream, because it was literally like if you played a movie reel back, it was that specific to what happened, to what he was wearing, to,
Whoa.
the bed that we were laying in, all of those kinds of things. And so that's why it was so hard for me that morning to recognize that I wasn't in that state. Right. And that, the only thing that broke me out of it was something different happening in the dream, which was picking up the phone, because prior to that, the dream had always ended. And I hadn't gotten to the point of picking up the phone. And so even on the phone, I was still in this state of trying to figure out, am I dreaming or is this happening? And I think I was probably in that daze the whole time, when paramedics got there and everything. And it was so interesting because they wouldn't let me be in the room, and they took me out of the room and everything. But I felt like the entire time that he was in that room, he was also in there with me. It was a very strange feeling. Yeah, 100%. I've never felt his presence leave. I never felt in his passing, when his physical form left the house, when they brought his physical form out of the house, I never felt his presence leave. I never felt like he was gone. And, there was a nickname that I would call him, and it's not PG-13, so I won't put that out there, but but there's a nickname that I would call him. It was sort of a love thing between us. And that nickname was the name of the funeral service that came and picked him up. Yeah.
Wow.
And I remember sitting in the living room and laughing, and I think back on it now, and I'm like, gosh, they must have thought that I was insane or in shock or something.
Yeah.
But watching those guys bring him out, and on the backs of their jackets was that nickname, was like, immediately I was like, oh, that was the first way that I feel like he told me, no, I'm still here. My body might be leaving, but I'm still here. And he showed me that in multiple ways, and he has over the last almost 3 years. So that is now why I'm so invested in this.
Before we, if it's okay, before we share more about what you've been experiencing over the last 3 years, can you tell me, did you grow up in a religious home or a spiritual home at all?
I did. So I grew up Southern Baptist.
Oh, okay.
And I grew up, it has been until very recently a very tricky situation for me, because I experienced, unfortunately, some religious trauma, and I left the church. I didn't want to have anything to do with it for a long time. So I have always believed in God. I've always believed in a higher power, but the sort of religious trauma made it really hard for me to sort of, I don't know. It made it hard for me to believe in the same things that my family believed in, or believe in. And that's been a source of a little bit of contention, because I think they don't always understand where I come from. And I feel bad because I know that their faith is genuine. So this has sort of brought me back to religion in a roundabout way, but also in a different way than the way that I grew up. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I was just curious. So you always believed in an afterlife then?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so so that first day, you're feeling his presence, and did he try to reach out to you that day in another way or in the days? Uh,
Yeah, so the night that he passed, so he passed in sort of, we don't exactly know when, but sometime in the early morning
mm,
of February, um of February 20th. So um that night I stayed at a friend of ours, which is a really close friend of ours, and I was sitting at at their dinner table, journaling, because I still to this day write to him in my journal. And this rabbit, it was like we had feet of snow, Julie,
mm,
and this rabbit came up to the door right beside me. And it was funny because months previous to this, when William was in the hospital and stuff like that, I had said to him, I never see rabbits anymore, because when I was a kid, I used to raise them. I used to breed rabbits.
uh-huh.
And I had made that comment to him, I never see rabbits anymore. And so that was another thing that day that made me think, okay, he's telling me, like, I'm going to give you this rabbit so you can see, we just talked about this, and I'm going to show you this rabbit. So there was
Yeah.
that. There was
Wow.
that. Uh, he immediately made sure that I was okay, and I think he did that because he knew I needed it. He
Mhm.
knew that I like that man is my world. He's everything to me. So I think he knew I needed that to get through that day, because I might not have gotten through that day, uh, to be quite blunt. So I think he needed to show me that he was not just gone. Yeah.
Right. And had you been journaling even like as a young girl or just,
Yes.
oh,
Yeah.
you always just journaled? Okay.
I've journaled since I was about 15. It's always been sort of a therapeutic thing for me. I've always been a writer, all of that
Mm,
sort of thing. So I used to journal just regularly. And then when I married William, I changed my journaling to, and it was love letters to him, basically, or
mm,
just writings to him, and things about our day,
wow.
and that kind of thing. And I've continued that since his passing. And I actually think it is a key factor in our continued communication. I think that the journaling is a big part of it.
I have heard that as well,
Yeah,
that the more you um make it real, and it's like this faith and this belief, and it's real to
absolutely.
you,
Yeah.
and then it's like an open door for them to, well, this is what I've heard, reach out to you also in some ways.
I
So
feel like journaling, if you sit and you actually do it, and you don't have all these other distractions around you, um, the thoughts are pure, if that makes sense.
mhm,
So when you're writing, when you write something, you're also speaking it in your mind,
mhm,
because you can't really write it without speaking it in your mind.
yes, yes,
And so for me, I think that's why it works between us. And I've dabbled in a little bit of automatic writing, in where I've written him a letter, and then I'll just sort of write whatever comes to mind.
yes.
Yeah. So
Absolutely. I was going to
yeah,
ask you that if,
yeah,
because I know some people, a lot of people, they do inspired writing, just whether it's poetry or just writings, and also automatic writing
yeah,
where they, yeah, I think that's awesome. I'm kind of interested in that myself.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so what's interesting, one of the interesting things about your relationship is that he's still with you, correct?
Every day.
Still
Yeah.
with you.
Oh
Is he
yeah.
here now?
Oh yeah.
How does he feel about you sharing all this?
He was excited. I could feel, so the way to explain how he is here with me is that it's not that I feel like he's literally like in form standing behind me. It's that I can feel the palpitations in my heart that I know aren't
Mm,
mine. I can feel the changes in my own emotions that I
wow.
know aren't mine. I can hear voices, like I can hear his voice in my head, or words that he would say in a formulation that I wouldn't say it, if that makes sense. So I very much feel like, um, we were two of the same soul. And so I think when he passed, and because we prepared each other for that passing, and he prepared me for the physical, sort of departure of that, I think his soul stayed with me. Yeah.
Would this be called twin flame or soulmate?
I think a lot of people would definitely call it twin flame. I've always called him my soulmate. He's always called me his soulmate. I very much believe that this is not the first or the last life that we'll live together. I mean, perfect example of that is I literally talked to him for a year online, and I moved in with him the weekend that I met him in person. We had never met in person before that. We had never spent time together before that, but I literally came down here to visit and could not leave. I could not bring myself apart from him. And there was a 21-year age difference between us. You know, lots of things that would have said there's no way this relationship could work. People did say that. But I think that it's quite obvious in our physical relationship that it worked. And it's continuing to show that, you know, love doesn't just disintegrate when someone leaves the physical plane, you know?
Have you had increasing communications or stronger communications over the last 3 years?
Yes.
Would you say?
Yes.
How did you develop that? Because you didn't know how this worked. Did you go to classes? Did you just start reaching out to others in groups? How?
I didn't know. So this is probably, this is another thing that happened previous to William's passing. So actually a few years before William passed, randomly, he asked me to go to our local metaphysical shop and buy a deck of tarot cards.
Oh.
Didn't tell me what tarot cards to get, didn't tell me what he wanted specifically, just asked me to go and grab them. And I did, and I brought them back to him, and he picked out one card for him and one card for me, took a picture of both those cards, put the deck in a box, and, you know, like wrapped it up and never touched it. Never did anything with it. So I never thought about it. I didn't think about it. But the one thing to know about William is William didn't have possessions that he didn't do something with. He didn't keep things that didn't mean something to him. And so I know that these tarot cards mean something to him. And so a few days after his passing, actually a few days after his passing, for like several days, I would sleep on a pallet in the living room because I didn't want to sleep in the bed. And every single morning for the first like week at exactly 3 a.m., I would wake up with the inclination to go to bed, and I wouldn't have any fear in it. I wouldn't be upset. I wouldn't be depressed. I wouldn't anything. I would literally just get up in my sleepy state, you know, and go to bed and lay down, and just like he was there, you know. And one of those nights, I was laying in bed and I got this sort of feeling. This was the first sort of, I guess, more physical communication between him and I. But I got this feeling that I should take out his tarot cards and try to learn them. And I was like, I had no idea how to learn these tarot. Like, tarot is not easy to learn. It's not like oracle cards that you can pick out and sort of, you know, have your own sort of perspective on it. Tarot has, you know, quite a lot of rules to it. And so I thought, okay, all right, I'll do that in the morning. And he was like, no, go get that deck. And so I did, and I pulled a card, and the first card that I pulled from his deck, to my recollection, I'm pretty sure that this is the card, was the companionship card. And that just, I don't know, it just immediately was a card that I resonated with. And so after that, a couple of days later, I didn't have the book that went with the deck. And I knew that I had bought the set for him. I could not find the book at all. And so I went back to that same metaphysical shop that I got the tarot cards at, and was hoping that the deck, just the book would be there.
Right.
No luck. There was no book. But when I went into the shop, the woman that runs the shop, she and I had a history, but neither one of us knew she owned the shop now. And neither one of us knew we were going to come back into contact with each other. She just had owned a bookstore years before this that I used to go in and chat with her before work. And, you know, we'd just, you know, banter back and forth. But she had bought this metaphysical store, and the person that had sold me his cards originally has passed on. And so I sat there with this woman for several hours, just talking and explaining to her what was happening and the things that I was feeling. And, you know, That same day, another woman came in who had recently lost her son, and she explained to me that she had these same feelings when she lost her son, and her advice to me was to follow it. She said,
Yeah.
just lean into it. Don't be scared. Don't be afraid. Don't be worried. Don't, try to overanalyze it. Just feel whatever it is that you're feeling, write it down, and just go with it. And so that's what I did. And I came home, and about an hour after I got home, I found the book.
Oh, okay.
I found the book. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, I think that was our first communication. And so then every day since then, I've picked a card from that deck every morning. We have a cup of tea, and I pick, a tarot card, and I journal about it. And I have this big thing where I, see how many times I get the companion card, because that was like our original card. And so that's where I started sort of getting to know people and understanding more. And I've gone back to this metaphysical shop more and more now. And now that I do tarot readings, I do them there, and I've gotten to know the community.
Nice.
And a lot of people. And that's where I built my confidence, was in hearing that there are way more experiences than I knew. So
So
I
you
wasn't the
started
only one.
learning. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Have you met others, who are, wait, I've heard this is called transdimensional relationship,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I've interviewed a few others. Are you also in that, happen to
I
be in
am.
that life, love,
Love
that
After
group,
Life.
Love After Life? Okay, so you
Yes.
are in
With
that
Mary
group.
Beth and William. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. So you're starting to learn more and more. And so what other kinds of, have you had dreams, lucid dreams with your husband, or out of body experiences or anything like that?
I haven't had as many as a lot of people have, but I have had.
Wow.
So on the night of summer solstice 2020,
Uh-huh.
I had done sort of a ritual before. I'm very big with ritual, and William and I were always big with rituals, even before his passing. We always lit a candle together at night.
Oh.
Yeah, he always would put a candle in the window for me if I was having a bad day, to light my way home. Um, so as much as we didn't think about the metaphysical stuff, we were doing it our entire relationship. We were doing it the whole time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I had sort of done that night. I'd lit a candle. I'd lit his favorite incense. I had sort of read some tarot, and I had journaled and all of that kind of thing. And I said to him, I was like, this is the summer solstice. Sort of the sun has always been big with me. I don't know why, but the sun is like huge for me. Whenever I'm depressed, I just go out and see the sun and I'm fine. But he used to call me his light. So I think that is also another big thing about it. But that night, I went to sleep. Nothing happened. Everything was normal. And then I woke up in the morning about 6 a.m. and nothing happened. And I just got this sort of push to just go back to bed. And normally I can't, like, if I'm awake, I can't fall back asleep. That's not a thing for me. Normally I'm awake, especially since his passing and the way that he passed. If I'm awake, I'm awake. And so I woke up at 6 a.m., got this sort of inkling to go back to bed. I went back to bed, and I dreamt of him, but it wasn't a dream, because the only way that I can describe it is sort of like suspended animation. It was like we were in this space that had no color. And when I say no color, it wasn't black. It just, there was no color.
Okay.
I don't know how to explain it more than to say, like, there just was no color. But it wasn't scary. It was, sometimes I think that it might be the way a baby is in a womb, if that makes sense. And that sort of, in the water, and all of that kind of thing, just a comfort. And that's exactly how it was. That's exactly the way things felt, was just that he and I were floating in this sort of suspended animation. There was no color, no wind, no water, no anything. It was just there. And the first thing he said to me was, "I'm sorry, they took me before I could tell you." And so I was like, okay, I'm so confused. Like, but I didn't think this in my mind, right? Like when I was in this dream, when I was in this sort of experience, that didn't cross my mind.
Right.
But he said to me, they took me before I could, No, I'm sorry. He said they took me before I could realize. That's what he said. They took me before I could realize.
Okay.
And so again, I didn't think of anything. And I just said to him, it's okay. I'm okay. I just need to know that you're okay. And I remember him saying to me, I'm fine. But I'm here with you. And that was it. But it was like you would have like a 3-hour conversation.
Yeah.
It's what it felt like we had spoken for and been together for 3 hours,
Wow.
but really it was like 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember we were sort of laying in this, cocoon of whatever. And I was looking this way, and from this way, I just sensed light coming towards us. And I said to him, they're coming to get you, aren't they?
Oh.
And he didn't respond. It was like we both just knew. We both just understood what had happened, and it was fine. And I wasn't upset. I wasn't scared. I wasn't worried. I didn't think this was the last time I was going to see him, anything like that. And before that sort of light or whatever that was, that energy that got to him, he said to me, and I don't know yet, okay, so stay tuned. He said, I'll see you in the cave, or I'll see you in the cape. I don't know which one it is. I've written it in my journal because I'm like, okay, maybe I'm going to travel one day and I'm going to have an experience where I don't know.
Yeah.
But I remember waking up and I was like, oh my God, thank you. Oh my God, thank you. I was like bouncing in my bed, and I grabbed my journal and I wrote everything down so I wouldn't forget. But it's one of those things, you just don't forget any of the details. And then the weirder thing about it was I was going for a walk with our friend that morning. And we went on this walk. We went through the park and everything like that. And again, I live in Ontario, Canada. I was born in North Carolina. And we came up on this garden. And in the garden was a picture of Fort Bragg. And now I was young. I couldn't remember where Fort Bragg was, but I knew that Fort Bragg was like important in my life. And so I called my sister and I said, hey, weren't you born on Fort Bragg? And she said, no. And I was like, no. She's like, no. I was like, why do I know that? She's like, because you were born on Fort Bragg. And I was like, oh, okay. So it was crazy to me that after this dream, after being with him, going to this sort of on this walk with this friend, we end up in this sort of garden, and there's pictures everywhere of where I was born in a completely different country.
Interesting. Yeah.
It just made no sense to me. And I said to my sister, I was like, I'm so confused. And I took a picture of one of the pictures, and she literally said to me, that's where Daddy broke his ankle. And I said, pardon? She goes, that place right there, the picture of it was a street sign going into Fort Bragg. It's a military base. It was a street sign. She said, literally at that exact spot, walking in there, that's where Daddy fell and rolled his ankle and broke his ankle. And I was like, I don't know what's happening right now, but I just knew that it was just further confirmation that, you're not crazy. You're not experiencing, you're not experiencing things in your head. You're actually experiencing these things, and
Right.
And then a little bit further down, I sat down with my friend, and she and I sat on this ledge, and there was a dove in between us. And I have pictures of all of this. There's this dove in between us, and the dove did not move. Was completely alive, completely fine, but just staring at me and just sitting there, not moving, not anything, not scared, nothing. And I was just talking to it and cooing to it because I do that with animals. And it never moved. We got up and walked on, and it was still there. No, nothing. Yeah.
Wow.
And this was all the same day as that lucid dream, as that experience that we had.
Right.
And that is the only vivid physical lucid dream that I've had with him. But I'm praying there will be lots more to come.
Yes. How does your family feel about your continuing relationship with your husband?
Well, it's interesting because up until a few months ago, I don't think anybody really understood. I think everybody knew I love my husband, and I've always been very, very devoted to my husband. And we've always kind of had that love story that everybody's always like, oh, William and Jaelina, William and Jaelina. And no one ever talked about Jaelina without talking about William, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But I think they always thought I was just in a phase and I was going to move on and it's fine and she's young and, you know, all of that kind of thing. But a few months ago, my sister lost her husband. And it was not quite as sudden, but it was not expected. And on his deathbed, when he was with my sister, he was on hospice. He had brain cancer. And he saw William, and he said that visibly out loud.
Wow.
Because he said, "Who is this tall man with a beard sitting at the end of my bed?" And the thing to know about William is William and my sister's husband is Steve. They've never met. They never met in person. They'd talked and things like that. And he'd certainly seen pictures of him, but they'd never met. So the idea of who is this person sitting at the end of my bed, and we knew it wasn't his family because he had that experience previous to this. A few hours before this, he was talking to my sister about his parents, and both his parents have passed.
Wow.
And so he was saying, my parents are here.
Okay.
So, you know, yeah, it was, I think then that my family realized there is something here, you know, some of them at least, you know, my sister certainly has been really supportive about it. You know, I have some aunts that I don't know that they necessarily understand, but they're certainly supportive of it. I think that a large part of my family does hope that I will, you know, remarry and repartner and all of that sort of thing. But I hope that I can show them that it's not that I don't want to move on. It's not that I don't want to remarry. It's that I'm still married. It's that I'm still in a relationship and I've never not been in a relationship with my husband. And that's how I feel about it. And I feel like, you know, it's not like William wouldn't want me to remarry. It's not like he's telling me you have to stay with me. He wouldn't do that. He has always cared about me, has always had my best interest at heart. And if he thought that I wanted to move on, if he thought that I wanted to fall in love with someone else, you know, he would certainly, he would step aside. But I don't want that. And he knows that. And I think he's happy that I don't want that. But I think that's difficult for people that are in the living that haven't experienced the same things that I have and other people have, you know.
Have you learned a few things about the afterlife through your interactions with William, or just maybe downloads or intuition, or because you've been having this transdimensional kind of relationship for how many years? 3?
Almost 3. Yeah. So
3
in
years.
February, it'll be 3 years. I think that for me, I don't see the afterlife as a separate entity, if that makes sense. I see it more like a veil. And so I feel like as I am continuing with life, William is still here. He's just on the other side of the veil. And I feel like when I go to a restaurant, or when I go to a movie, or when I go to a theater, it's not like he's in some replica of that. You know, it's not like he's in a different place experiencing that, which I think is what some people do believe, which is totally valid, and that's their experience. But for me, I don't feel like it's a replica. I don't feel like it's a different place. I feel like he is here with me. Now, I don't know what that will look like when we both pass.
Right. Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure yet. I'm not that far in our journey to know that, but I do think that there is more to just this plane. I do think there is more than just where we're at, because perfect example is that sort of dream state that we were in, and someone was coming, like someone was coming to get him. And so I do believe that there's something else, but I think there's a shift in time and space. And so while he's with me, he can still be doing other things and learning other things.
Do you think, I've heard it also, like our loved ones who have passed, and we sense their presence, it's just that they're on a different vibrational frequency. They're vibrating on a different frequency than we are.
Absolutely. And again, you know, for me, it goes back to that sort of time thing. I think that we see time in a very linear way, and we know, you know, scientifically it's been proven that it isn't linear. We know that it's not, but like our human brains, that's how we see it. I think that there's a shift in sort of time and space, and where I'm experiencing these things now, and I'm experiencing him now, but all of me is not here now, if that makes sense.
kind of, actually.
So I think that we are, there's that whole saying of like we're spiritual beings having a human experience. I don't think that all of our spirit or all of our soul or whatever it is that you want to call it, I don't think all of us are sort of downloaded to this place. I think that
I've heard that.
a part of us are,
Some people say consciousness,
or higher self, yeah.
That, and I've also heard that while we are awake here, this is a whole other kind of conversation maybe, but it's people who believe that we have an astral self, they might call it that, that when we're awake here, our astral self is sleeping there, wherever there is, and vice versa when,
it's like we switch.
Or something. And then when we're asleep, we can tap into our astral self, wherever that is. And if we become conscious, we can start having more lucid experiences of the afterlife.
Well, yeah. And like, I mean, the thing for me is like, I know there's got to be something physical because, sort of the signs that they send us can be very physical. For instance, with me, like William has always sent me dimes and feathers. And feathers, like the only reason I know they're from him is because I never got them before him. But they come up in very different places. Like sometimes, like I used to be a restaurant manager, and I would find feathers in my tills where there's no way that there's like it wouldn't just naturally be there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I would find feathers in certain places, and then I started with the dimes. I would find this, and I can't remember. Someone told me you should ask him for a year. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to ask him for the year that we got married. And so that was 2008. So I said to him, I was like, okay, I'm going to test you. If this is really you, give me a dime from 2008. And I have tons of dimes and quarters from 2008 now.
Okay. He's like, all right.
And it's funny because it was dimes, and I was like, I'm going to test you. Give me this, 2008 dime. And then it was all of a sudden it was quarters in 2008, which is very much, if anybody knew my husband, he's a very cheeky individual, he's going to be like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever, here, one up you.
Right.
He's got an amazing humor that has definitely transferred into sort of, it's continued, like it's not,
right.
It's not
He's,
stopped,
he's the same person, personality, and
he's felt by people too. That's the other thing, is that I've met people since his passing that have never met him. Friends and things like that have never met him, but feel like they know him, because I've been told by a lot of people that it's like I'm not one person anymore. It's like when I go places, people feel like there's more than one person there, which is really interesting to me.
Very.
I don't feel like one person anymore.
Okay.
I don't. I've taken on, like, I hated cheese. All of a sudden I like cheese. I crave pickles, and like pickles were the last thing he ever ate, and like he craved pickles all the time. And
wow.
There's just things that are interesting to me that I'm just like, I don't know and understand it yet, but I know that it's different than it was before he passed. So
I know we're running up on time, but can I ask you what you have learned about past lives? Like how, because you said, that you've had past lives together. Does this mean, so when you cross over, are you guys going to hang out on the afterlife, or are you guys going to incarnate? Do you think you would both incarnate into another life? Do you have any opinion on that?
So I think, I've always sort of thought that, you hear the term old soul a lot. I know that I'm sort of an old soul. I know that William is an old soul, but I think that William is more of an old soul than I am. And I think that he has lived longer than I have. I think that we've lived a lot of lives together. And the reason I say that is, I have had some readings where mediums have stated that we've been together before. And it's interesting because we haven't always been together as husband and wife. We've also been siblings. And the reason I say that's interesting is because we've had multiple people tell us we look alike, and we look like siblings, even though there's 21 years between us. But we would have like cab drivers. William was really well known sort of by the cab drivers in our city because he always took the same cab company, so much so that those guys came to his funeral, like he was part of the family.
Wow.
And they would often say, like, you guys look like siblings. And it's funny because if you look at pictures sort of older in his life before his physical passing, we have started to look more and more alike,
Hmm.
which is interesting. And another
Yeah.
thing that I don't quite understand yet.
Yeah.
It's all part of the process, but if you look at pictures of sort of just before his passing, our facial structure, things like that are very, very similar.
Huh.
And so we also have things like we both are really, really interested in sort of the Japanese culture. We're very interested in the Asian culture. He has always sort of aligned himself with sort of samurai like
Mhm.
you know, ways of thinking and things like that. And he has so many things on his computer about, different ways of living, in sort of that honorable way.
Mm.
And I think personally, I think that we have had a past life in Japan.
Mhm.
And I think that's why we both are so connected with it. So I think when people are so connected to things, I think they've actually experienced it before and they just don't
Right. Right.
necessarily remember it, but they're somehow still remembering it.
Yep.
My take on it. That's my take on it. And I think that, when you move through different lives or different experiences, I think that we're doing that to help our soul
Mhm.
grow and to help each other's soul grow and that sort of thing. So that's what I have come to understand so far.
Mm. What
But
a
I'm still
journey.
growing. Yeah.
What a journey, right?
Yeah.
Um, Before we have to sign off, I'd really like you to have the last word if there's anything else on your heart, and maybe how the listeners can connect with you, because I know you do tarot readings, so they might want to be able to
I do.
connect with you.
Yeah. I think, the only thing really that's on my heart is just grief is hard, and when you lose someone, it's hard. And I think that it's so easy to get caught up in um the fact that they're no longer here physically. And I'm not one to push the rhetoric. I'm not one to say, well, I've experienced this, so you should experience this too. But I would just say, open your heart and lean in. Exactly like that woman said to me that first time that I walked into that store. Just lean into it. Don't overthink it. Don't, you know, try to understand it even right away. Just
Mm.
lean into it and be open to it and let yourself feel the emotions and how they make you feel. And if they make you happy, just take it, because I think that's what life's about. It's just experiencing things and learning and growing and loving. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful. And I can also, I think I did with William's interview, not your husband's, but
No, we do that all the time.
another one.
We say Irene's William because Irene and Williams. Yeah.
I think I put the Love After Life link on his our interview, and I can do that with yours as well.
Yeah, sure.
And your, I think you said Instagram,
Yeah.
right?
So I have Eternally His Jaelina is my Instagram. So you'll see like a lot of that is also my journaling. So I do a lot of different art journaling and stuff like that. So
Ooh.
that's up there as well. But that's also how you can get in contact with me if you would like a reading. I am very passionate about helping people and letting people sort of experience the same feelings and emotions that I've come from being able to feel like this isn't the end. So that's why
Mm.
I have offered tarot readings. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jaelina, so much
Well,
for
thank you.
this. So I so appreciate it. And thank you everyone for watching. This has been Julie McVeigh with Unordinary Made Ordinary. And I hope that you'll join us next time for another fascinating interview. And if you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you like this type of content, and hit the bell icon and all that. So I hope you're having a fantastic day or evening wherever you are on the planet or off the planet. And we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.